Eva Peron. You know, there are some names in history that just hit differently. Saint, sinner, revolutionary, the labels go on and on. But if we peel back the layers of the myth, what was her real impact on the women of Argentina? Well, today, we're going to dive deep into the complicated story of how women won the vote there and figure out just how much of that was truly because of Evita herself. So, let's get into it.
Right from the start, you've got these two totally opposite views of her. For millions of Argentina's poor, the working class, the descamisados, or the shirtless ones, she was this incredible, beloved champion. But then you have the old guard elite, her political opponents, and for them, she was this dangerous, highly questionable figure. And you really have to understand this deep split to get a handle on her story.
And that really gets us to the heart of it. When we talk about women finally getting the right to vote in Argentina, how much of that is really down to Evita? Was she this revolutionary force that made it all happen, or was she more like the final powerful push for a movement that was already well on its way? Let's find out.
Okay, so to get the real story on Evita's role, you can't just start with her. You got to rewind the clock. Because the fight for women's rights in Argentina didn't just pop up out of nowhere in the 1940s. Oh no, it was a long, tough struggle fought by some seriously determined feminists who had been laying the groundwork for years.
And I mean, look at how far back this goes. As early as 1910, Buenos Aires is hosting the first International Feminist Congress. And then, just a year later, one woman, well, she managed to do something pretty incredible, decades before it would become the law of the land.
And her strategy was just brilliant. Julieta Lanteri was a doctor, and she took her case to court with this really simple but powerful argument. She basically said, hey, the Constitution says who can vote, but it never, ever says that women can't. And guess what? She won. She became one of the very first women in all of South America to vote. What a massive precedent to set.
So you've got this groundwork already laid. The idea of women voting is out there, it's being talked about, it's been debated for years. And then a catalyst arrives. Eva Peron walks onto the political scene with the kind of power and the kind of platform to take this dream and actually make it a reality.
And these are the words that really light the fuse. When she talks about overcoming civil tutelage, she's talking about ending the idea that women were basically treated like children under the law. And she declares that women must vote. Get this, she said this just 3 days after her husband became president. This wasn't some polite suggestion, it was a demand, and she put the full force of the new government right behind it.
But here's the thing, even with all her popularity, it was not a slam dunk. Not at all. The bill got introduced right away, but it ran into this wall of resistance from conservatives. The Senate passed it fairly quickly, yeah, but then it just got stuck in the other house for over a year. And the whole time, Evita was relentlessly pressuring, campaigning, pushing, until finally in September 1947, Law 13,010 became official.
But for Evita, getting the vote passed, that was just the beginning. I mean, what good is a right if you don't have the organization to actually use it, right? So her next move was to build a political machine that could turn millions of brand new voters into a real organized political force.
And this is how she did it. She created the Peronist Women's Party, or the PPF. And this wasn't just some ladies' club attached to the main party. No, this was an entirely separate, powerful organization led by women, for women, designed to get them involved from the ground up in every single town and neighborhood.
The way she structured it was just genius. There were two kinds of local units. You had the sindicales, which were for women with jobs who were in unions. But, and this is so important, she also created ordinarias for housewives, for domestic workers, for women in rural areas, basically all the women who were traditionally left out of politics. It was a system built to make sure everyone had a place.
All right, so all of this work, it all leads up to the 1951 election. This is the big moment, the moment of truth. For the very first time, millions of Argentine women were going to vote, and they were also going to be on the ballot. It was this incredible moment of triumph, but it was also happening in the shadow of a really deep personal tragedy and some major political storms on the horizon. And the results? I mean, they were just staggering. 109 women were elected to legislative seats, both nationally and in the provinces. To go from 0 to over 100 in one single election, that's not just a change, that was a political earthquake. And it was a direct result of Evita's organizing.
And this is where the story becomes absolutely heartbreaking. While millions of women were lining up at the polls for the first time, Eva Peron, the woman who fought so hard to make it happen, cast her first and her only vote from a hospital bed. She was dying of cancer and would pass away less than a year later.
And this is such a crucial reminder, right, that progress isn't permanent. The Peronist government had also brought in a new constitution in 1949 that gave women legal equality with their husbands. But in 1955, a military coup toppled the government, and one of the first things they did was scrap that constitution. It would take 30 years, all the way until 1985, for those rights to finally be restored.
So after she died, something fascinating happened. Evita the person, well, she became Evita the symbol. A really powerful, really complicated symbol that all kinds of different and sometimes opposing groups would adopt and reinterpret for decades. And just look at the range of people who claim her as their own. It's wild. You've got labor unions who always saw her as their champion. You've got feminist movements, even ones who were critical of her politics, who had to acknowledge her impact. You had armed revolutionary groups like the Montoneros, who famously said, if Evita were alive, she would be one of us. And even today, a lot of younger people see her as this icon of rebellion, right up there with Che Guevara.
So, where does that leave us? Eva Perón didn't start the fight for women's suffrage in Argentina, that's clear. But her political will, her raw determination, and her organizational genius were absolutely the forces that pushed it over the finish line. Was she a champion of social justice who empowered the forgotten? Or was she a key part of an authoritarian government? Well, the complicated truth is, she was kind of both, and that's exactly why, all these years later, we're still debating who Eva Perón really was.